Imagine a city so vast, so intricate, that it stretched over hundreds of square kilometers, its temples rising like mountains from the dense jungle, adorned with stone carvings that whispered stories of gods and kings. And then it vanished, forgotten, consumed by the relentless march of time, nature, and human neglect. This was the Khmer Empire, a civilization that once dominated Southeast Asia, yet today is often reduced to photographs of crumbling temples and travel brochures about Angkor Wat. But behind the moss-covered stones lies a story of ambition, conquest, faith, and human resilience that rivals any empire in history. The Khmer Empire, at its height between the 9th and 15th centuries, was a powerhouse. Its influence stretched across what is now Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, and southern Vietnam. Yet, despite its size and sophistication, the empire is not a household name. Unlike Rome or Egypt, the Khmer left behind no continuous empire to transition into modern states. Instead, the jungle swallowed their cities, and history forgot their conquests. But forget them we should not, because the Khmer legacy reshaped the region and left lessons still relevant today. The story begins not with grand temples or kings, but with the land itself. The Mekong River and its tributaries provided fertile soil that allowed agriculture to flourish. In a time when most civilizations relied on simple irrigation, the Khmer engineered complex water systems, reservoirs, canals, and ponds that fueled their economy and fed their population. Some scholars argue that these hydraulic achievements were the real backbone of the empire, allowing it to support a population far larger than any of its neighbors. The Khmer were not just builders, they were innovators. They manipulated nature itself to create a living, breathing engine for civilization. Yet, for all their technological brilliance, the empire's story is most vividly told through its kings. Jayavarman II, often considered the founding figure, declared himself Chakravartin, a universal ruler in 802 CE. It was a bold statement. He positioned himself as a divine figure, legitimized by rituals that fused local traditions with Hindu cosmology. This was a strategic genius. By intertwining religion with kingship, Jayavarman II ensured loyalty and obedience, giving rise to a centralized power that could marshal resources, build monumental structures, and expand its influence. He planted the seeds of an empire that would last for over 6 centuries, long enough to leave marks on history that still resonate. What made the Khmer Empire extraordinary was not just its rulers, but its ambition. These were people who believed that stone could speak for eternity. Temples were not merely places of worship, they were statements of power, wealth, and divine favor. Angkor Wat, the most famous of these structures, was designed to be a microcosm of the universe, a bridge between heaven and earth. Every carving, every tower, every moat symbolized a worldview, a cosmology, and the centrality of the king in that cosmic order. The Khmer did not just build cities, they built philosophy, encoded in stone for all who could read its stories. And yet, for all this magnificence, the empire would not endure. Unlike Rome, which fell to invading armies, or China, which transitioned dynastically, the Khmer Empire slowly faded. Scholars debate why. Some point to ecological collapse. The massive water management system that once sustained life eventually became a vulnerability. Droughts and floods may have disrupted rice production, destabilizing the economy. Others suggest external pressures, invasions by rival kingdoms, trade disruptions, and shifting political alliances chipped away at the empire's strength. Internal corruption, succession disputes, and social unrest also weakened central authority. It was not one catastrophic event, but a series of small, compounding crises that allowed a great empire to slip quietly into the jungle. By the 15th century, Angkor was largely abandoned. The capital shifted to Phnom Penh, closer to trade routes and rivers, less vulnerable to environmental disruption. Temples that had taken decades, sometimes generations, to build were left to rot. Vines crept over the stone faces of deities, and elephants and tigers roamed where kings once held court. By the time European explorers stumbled upon Angkor centuries later, they could scarcely believe the scale of what lay hidden. Here was a civilization that had conquered, innovated, and inspired, now reduced to moss, mystery, and awe. But to say the Khmer were forgotten is only partially true. In Cambodia, these ruins are living history, a source of national pride and identity. Scholars worldwide continue to uncover details about their society, their religion, and their technology. Modern archaeologists use LiDAR mapping to peer through dense jungle and reveal city layouts invisible to the naked eye. Each discovery reminds us, empires, no matter how great, can vanish, but their influence often lingers in ways we may not immediately see. The Khmer shaped Southeast Asian culture, language, art, and religion, echoes of which survive in ceremonies, folklore, and temple architecture today. The lesson of the Khmer Empire is both inspiring and sobering. It is a testament to human ingenuity, ambition, and the desire to leave a mark on the world. At the same time, it is a cautionary tale about the fragility of civilization. Even the most advanced societies can crumble if they fail to adapt to changing circumstances, whether environmental, political, or social. For us, walking among the ruins of Angkor, the Khmer speak not only of past glory, but also of the impermanence of human achievement. So as we journey through this documentary, remember, the Khmer Empire was more than stone and temples. It was a living, breathing civilization of dreamers, warriors, and visionaries. It rose from a humble beginning, reached staggering heights, and then faded into obscurity. But in its silence, it still has much to teach us about power, ambition, faith, and the human desire to leave a legacy. Before Angkor became a sprawling capital dotted with massive temples, it was a modest settlement along the Tondo Sap and Mekong rivers. Life was simple, yet the foundations of greatness were already being laid. Imagine a small, muddy village where farmers tilled the land, fishermen cast their nets, and tribal leaders negotiated power through alliances, not swords. From these humble beginnings arose one of the most extraordinary civilizations in human history, the Khmer Empire. The rise of Angkor wasn't an overnight miracle. It was the result of vision, strategy, and an unyielding desire to control the land and its resources. The region's geography played a crucial role. The Tondo Sap, Southeast Asia's largest freshwater lake, expanded and contracted dramatically with the monsoons, creating fertile plains perfect for rice cultivation. Early settlers learned to harness this abundance. They built small canals and embankments to manage seasonal flooding, creating a reliable food source that allowed populations to grow. Without these agricultural innovations, the empire would never have emerged. Early Khmer society was structured around villages, each led by a local chief or chieftain. These leaders were the first architects of political power, establishing networks of loyalty and tribute. Over time, ambitious leaders sought to consolidate control beyond their villages. This is where the first seeds of Angkor's transformation into a capital began. By uniting smaller communities under centralized leadership, they could mobilize labor for large-scale projects and assert dominance over rival groups. It was political genius disguised as simple village administration. Religion also played a pivotal role in unifying these early communities. Hinduism, with its intricate pantheon of gods and cosmic order, provided a framework for kingship. The ruler was no mere mortal. He was a divine representative, a living embodiment of the gods on earth. Jayavarman II, often called the father of the Khmer Empire, used this religious authority to declare himself Chakravartin, or Universal King, around 802 CE. This declaration was more than ceremonial. It gave him legitimacy and centralized control over a region that had previously been fragmented. By blending faith and politics, the Khmer established a system that would allow them to mobilize entire populations for grand construction projects, military campaigns, and governance. With centralized power, infrastructure became the next frontier. Early rulers understood that controlling water meant controlling life itself. The Khmer began constructing borees, massive reservoirs, and intricate canal systems to store water and irrigate rice fields. These hydraulic projects weren't just practical, they were political statements. By providing food security and regulating floods, the king reinforced his role as protector of the people. The ability to command labor for these monumental works also reinforced social hierarchy, consolidating the ruler's authority and laying the foundation for a complex empire. Angkor's rise also depended on strategic diplomacy and military skill. The Khmer were surrounded by other ambitious kingdoms, from the Cham in modern-day Vietnam to various Thai and Lao principalities. Rather than relying solely on warfare, Khmer leaders often combined negotiation, marriage alliances, and selective conquest to expand their influence. When they did fight, their armies were formidable. Early military campaigns allowed the Khmer to secure trade routes, protect agricultural lands, and assert dominance over neighboring territories. This combination of diplomacy, strategy, and military power accelerated Angkor's transformation from a modest settlement to a regional powerhouse. Trade further fueled the empire's growth. Situated at the crossroads of maritime and riverine routes, Angkor benefited from the flow of goods, ideas, and culture. Indian and Chinese merchants brought not just commodities, but knowledge, religion, and artistic influence. Hinduism and later Mahayana Buddhism began to permeate Khmer society, influencing temple architecture, rituals, and governance. Artisans adapted these imported ideas, blending them with local traditions to create a uniquely Khmer culture, a culture that celebrated both human achievement and divine order. By the 9th century, Angkor had evolved into more than just a political center. It had become a cultural and spiritual heartland. Early temples, initially modest in scale, began to appear, reflecting both religious devotion and the king's authority. These structures symbolized the empire's growing complexity and ambition. Unlike simple village shrines, they were designed to impress, inspire, and intimidate. Their construction required meticulous planning, immense labor, and sophisticated engineering, an early indication of the grandeur that Angkor would later achieve. But growth came with challenges. Expanding populations demanded more resources, and as the empire grew, so did the need for administrative systems to manage them. Early Khmer rulers developed a bureaucracy that oversaw taxation, labor, and legal matters, ensuring that the empire could function efficiently. Temples were not just religious centers, they doubled as administrative hubs, storing records, managing labor, and coordinating public works. This integration of governance, religion, and infrastructure was a hallmark of the Khmer approach to empire building. By the 10th century, Angkor was poised for greatness. The foundations laid by early rulers, agricultural mastery, centralized authority, religious legitimacy, military strength, and strategic trade set the stage for the construction of monumental temples and sprawling cities. Each new king inherited a framework that allowed him to dream bigger, conquer further, and leave a mark that would echo through centuries. What began as a humble settlement had become a beacon of civilization, attracting people, talent, and resources from across the region. The rise of Angkor teaches us a vital lesson. Empires are never built overnight. They are the result of vision, persistence, and the ability to harmonize nature, society, and faith. The Khmer transformed a simple riverine settlement into a thriving hub of power, culture, and innovation. And yet, even at this early stage, the seeds of vulnerability were planted. Centralized power, reliance on hydraulic systems, and expansive cities would later contribute to the empire's eventual decline. But for now, Angkor was ascending, unstoppable, ambitious, and destined to leave a mark on history that would survive the test of time. In the heart of the 9th century, amidst dense jungles, winding rivers, and scattered villages, a man emerged whose vision would change Southeast Asia forever. His name was Jayavarman II, and he is remembered as the founder of the Khmer Empire, a ruler whose ambition was as vast as the lands he would come to control. But Jayavarman II's rise was anything but guaranteed. The political landscape was fragmented, filled with rival chieftains, small kingdoms, and foreign influences, each vying for power. To consolidate authority over this chaotic terrain, Jayavarman II would have to be both a warrior and a visionary, a king who could command loyalty not just through force, but through faith, culture, and ideology. Before his reign, the region was divided into competing principalities, each ruled by local chieftains who paid little heed to a central authority. These chiefs wielded their own armies, controlled their own fertile lands, and often clashed with neighbors over resources and influence. It was a landscape of constant flux, where alliances were temporary and betrayal commonplace. In such a world, establishing a lasting empire seemed almost impossible. Yet, Jayavarman II was determined to do what no leader before him had: unify these fragmented territories under a single divine authority. The turning point came in 802 CE, when Jayavarman II performed the legendary Devaraja ritual, declaring himself the universal king. This wasn't just political theater, it was revolutionary. By claiming divine status, he positioned himself as a living god on earth, a representative of the gods who could command loyalty beyond mere fear or material wealth. The Devaraja ritual involved the consecration of a linga, a symbolic representation of the god Shiva, and proclaimed that the king was the earthly embodiment of divine power. In one decisive act, Jayavarman II transformed kingship from a temporal authority into a sacred mandate. This fusion of religion and governance would become the cornerstone of Khmer rule for centuries. Jayavarman II's genius lay not only in ceremony, but in strategy. He built alliances through marriage, diplomacy, and sometimes coercion, weaving a web of loyalty that extended across the region. He understood that an empire could not rely solely on the sword. It required legitimacy in the eyes of both the people and rival rulers. By claiming divine authority, he created a moral and religious justification for conquest, a framework that allowed him to expand Khmer influence without the constant drain of endless warfare. Tributes from conquered or allied territories became a symbol of the empire's reach and reinforced the king's image as a divinely sanctioned ruler. But Jayavarman II was also a warrior. Consolidating power in a fragmented landscape required military skill. Early campaigns were aimed at both neutralizing rivals and demonstrating the might of the nascent Khmer state. Though records are sparse, historians believe these battles were crucial in establishing the centralized authority needed to mobilize labor for the monumental projects that would follow. The combination of spiritual authority and military prowess made Jayavarman II uniquely equipped to turn disparate villages into a cohesive empire. One of his most enduring achievements was laying the foundations of Angkor as the political and cultural heart of the empire. Jayavarman II recognized that an empire needed more than armies and rituals. It needed infrastructure, administrative centers, and monumental symbols of power. Early Angkor was planned not just as a capital but as a statement, a reflection of the king's cosmic authority. The alignment of temples, reservoirs, and roads symbolized a world ordered by the king's divine mandate. It was an architectural and ideological blueprint that later rulers would expand upon to create the sprawling Angkor we know today. Religion played a dual role in Yasovarman II's reign. On one hand, it legitimized his authority and unified the populace. On the other, it became a tool for cultural identity. Hinduism, imported from India, provided a rich tapestry of myths, rituals, and symbolism. By adopting this religion and integrating local beliefs, Yasovarman II created a uniquely Khmer spiritual framework. Temples became both religious centers and instruments of governance, reinforcing the king's position while shaping the moral and cultural compass of society. Despite his achievements, Yasovarman II's reign was not without challenges. Maintaining control over a newly unified empire required constant vigilance. Rivalries did not disappear overnight, and the delicate balance between religious authority, military might, and administrative control demanded careful navigation. Every decision could mean the difference between consolidation and rebellion. Yet his vision endured, setting the stage for successive rulers to expand and elevate the empire to unprecedented heights. Yasovarman II's legacy is profound. By declaring himself a divine king, he transformed the Khmer political system into one capable of sustaining centuries of expansion, innovation, and monumental architecture. He taught the world that power is not merely about conquest, it is about vision, ideology, and the ability to inspire loyalty through a combination of fear, faith, and admiration. The Khmer Empire, which would later astonish generations with Angkor Wat and its other temples, owes its very existence to the bold, audacious vision of this single man. His story reminds us that empires are born not only from resources and armies, but from ideas. Yasovarman II's ability to fuse religion, politics, and culture created a framework that allowed the Khmer Empire to flourish long after his death. And while much of the empire would eventually fall to time and nature, the foundation he laid endured, echoing through stone temples, canals, and legends that survive to this day. The rise of Yasovarman II is a lesson in ambition, vision, and strategy. It demonstrates that leadership is about more than authority. It is about creating systems, inspiring people, and leaving a blueprint that others can follow. In his hands, the Khmer Empire became more than a collection of villages. It became a civilization capable of leaving a mark on the world that centuries of jungle could not erase. When we think of empires, we often imagine armies, kings, and political treaties. But in the Khmer Empire, power was etched in stone, carved into temples that towered over the jungle. These were not merely places of worship, they were thrones of power, symbols of divine authority, and instruments of political control. To understand the Khmer Empire, you must first understand their temples. They were the heart of civilization, the literal and metaphorical center of a kingdom built on faith, ambition, and art. The Khmer understood something that few civilizations grasped. Architecture could be power. By building massive temples, the king was declaring his dominance, not just over people, but over nature itself. Angkor Wat, with its 5 towers rising like lotus buds, was designed to represent Mount Meru, the mythical center of the universe in Hindu cosmology. The king's palace, the temple, and the surrounding city all mirrored the cosmos. When citizens entered the temple complex, they weren't just visiting a place of worship, they were stepping into the divine order of the world, with the king at its apex. Every carving and every statue reinforced his authority. Temples served a practical purpose as well. They were administrative centers, coordinating labor, storing resources, and managing tribute. Farmers, artisans, and laborers were mobilized through the temple network, which acted as both spiritual hub and governmental apparatus. The monumental construction of these temples required massive organization. Thousands of workers, engineers, and artisans had to be coordinated to quarry stone, carve intricate bas-reliefs, and transport materials across vast distances. Temples became the engine of the empire, blending devotion with logistics. Religious symbolism amplified political legitimacy. The Khmer kings often associated themselves with deities, Shiva, Vishnu, or later Buddha, portraying themselves as living gods. By embedding religious iconography into temples, they created a permanent visual narrative. The king was the chosen ruler, ordained by the heavens, and dissent was not only political rebellion, but also sacrilege. Every citizen, from peasants to nobles, encountered these messages daily. Power, in this sense, was omnipresent, etched in stone, and impossible to ignore. The temples also functioned as a tool of social cohesion. In a sprawling empire like Khmer, scattered across forests, rivers, and plains, maintaining unity was a constant challenge. Temples served as cultural and spiritual anchors, connecting distant villages to the central authority. Festivals, rituals, and ceremonies held at these sacred sites brought people together, reinforcing shared identity and loyalty to the king. They were physical manifestations of a centralized power that reached every corner of the empire. Consider the scale and ambition of these structures. Temples like Angkor Wat and Bayon weren't just large, they were architectural marvels. Engineers mastered water management, stone transport, and alignment with astronomical phenomena. Some temple complexes included reservoirs and canals, reflecting sophisticated understanding of hydraulics. The Khmer weren't building for mere aesthetics. They were building symbolic and functional cities, where temples dominated both the skyline and the imagination. Temples also served as monuments to memory and legitimacy. Every king sought to leave a lasting legacy through construction. By commissioning new temples, rulers immortalized themselves, declaring to future generations that they were worthy of divine favor and historical remembrance. These structures were carefully inscribed with bas-reliefs depicting military victories, religious narratives, and royal life, creating a permanent record of power and achievement. In a world without printing presses or digital media, stone was the ultimate communication tool. The role of temples extended into economic control as well. Lands and resources were often tied to temple complexes, with revenues from agriculture, trade, and labor supporting their maintenance. Temples were not just spiritual centers, they were economic hubs that reinforced the king's control over wealth and resources. This integration of religion, administration, and economy made temples indispensable to the functioning of the empire. Temples also played a subtle psychological role in governance. Standing beneath towering spires and intricate carvings, citizens and visitors alike were reminded of the king's omnipotence and the divine order that legitimized it. The sheer scale of these monuments inspired awe and loyalty, creating an emotional bond between ruler and subjects. It was power expressed not through fear or violence, but through wonder and reverence, a kind of soft authority that endured across generations. Interestingly, temples were also stages for innovation and creativity. Artisans and architects experimented with new forms, techniques, and styles, pushing the boundaries of what stone and design could achieve. The Khmer blended indigenous techniques with influences from India, creating a unique artistic language. This creative output reinforced the empire's cultural prestige, signaling that Khmer civilization was not only powerful but also sophisticated and enlightened. Yet, the temples also exposed vulnerabilities. Their reliance on vast labor forces and centralized planning made the empire dependent on strong leadership and resource management. When succession disputes, natural disasters, or external threats arose, the very systems that built these monuments could falter. In this sense, temples were both symbols of strength and markers of fragility, grand reminders of the empire's ambitions and the delicate balance required to sustain them. By turning temples into thrones of power, the Khmer kings created a civilization where religion, politics, art, and administration were inseparable. Their strategy was brilliant. A monument wasn't just a building, it was a statement, a tool, and a legacy. Centuries later, even as the jungle reclaimed much of Angkor, the surviving temples continue to tell the story of kings who wielded stone like a scepter, shaping both faith and society with every carved tower. In the Khmer Empire, power was not only in armies or decrees, it was in the stones that touched the sky, the carvings that told stories, and the temples that made the king a living god. Every spire, every moat, and every bas-relief was a calculated exercise in authority. To understand the empire, one must walk through these temples, feel their weight, and see how a civilization literally built its power into the landscape. The Khmer lesson is clear. Leadership and power are not only wielded through force, they can be manifested in culture, art, and architecture, creating legacies that outlast lifetimes. The temples of Angkor weren't just sacred spaces, they were the very thrones from which kings ruled and through which their authority endured across centuries. If there is one image that instantly evokes the Khmer Empire, it is Angkor Wat, a colossal temple complex rising from the jungle, its towers piercing the sky, its walls adorned with thousands of bas-reliefs that tell stories of gods, kings, and cosmic battles. Angkor Wat is more than a temple, it is a statement of ambition, faith, and ingenuity. It represents the apex of Khmer civilization, a masterpiece that embodies both the spiritual and political might of an empire that sought to be eternal. Construction of Angkor Wat began in the early 12th century under King Suryavarman II, one of the empire's most ambitious rulers. Suryavarman II envisioned a temple not just as a religious center, but as a reflection of his own power and cosmic significance. The design was meticulous. The 5 central towers represented Mount Meru, the sacred mountain of Hindu cosmology, considered the axis of the universe. Surrounding moats symbolized the cosmic ocean, while the temple's orientation aligned with the sun, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of astronomy. Every detail was intentional, every stone a message of divine order and royal authority. Angkor Wat was constructed from sandstone blocks transported from quarries miles away, a feat of engineering that remains astonishing even today. Tens of thousands of workers labored for decades, carving intricate scenes depicting Hindu epics like the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, battles, divine processions, and celestial beings. These carvings were more than decoration, they were a narrative of power, a visual history of the king's reign and his alignment with the gods. Pilgrims, subjects, and foreign visitors would see these stories carved in stone, reinforcing the king's authority and the empire's cultural sophistication. The temple's scale was equally impressive. Angkor Wat covers over 400 acres, making it one of the largest religious monuments in the world. Its symmetrical layout, towering spires, and concentric galleries reflect perfect geometric and architectural precision. Walking through its halls even today, one can sense the scale of human ambition required to erect such a masterpiece without modern machinery. The Khmer were not merely builders, they were visionaries who understood how architecture could inspire awe, reinforce ideology, and manifest divine presence on earth. Angkor Wat was also a political instrument. By constructing such an enormous and awe-inspiring monument, Suryavarman II projected his power not just to his subjects, but to neighboring kingdoms. The temple broadcasted a message. The Khmer Empire was rich, organized, and divinely sanctioned. This was soft power at its finest, an empire asserting dominance through artistry and spiritual symbolism rather than constant warfare. The temple itself became a throne, placing the king at the center of the universe and legitimizing his rule in the eyes of both people and gods. Religiously, Angkor Wat initially honored Vishnu, making it unique among Khmer temples, which often centered on Shiva. This choice reflected Suryavarman II's personal devotion, but also a clever political strategy. Aligning with Vishnu, the preserver god symbolized stability, protection, and cosmic order, qualities a ruler would want to associate with his reign. The temple was not just a spiritual hub. It was a cosmic command center, a place where earthly and divine authority converged. But Angkor Wat was more than a temple, it was also a cultural engine. The complex drew artisans, sculptors, engineers, and priests from across the empire and beyond. It became a center for learning, for experimentation in hydraulic engineering, and for the codification of Khmer artistic and religious traditions. The carvings alone demonstrate an advanced understanding of anatomy, perspective, and narrative storytelling, blending local styles with influences from India and Southeast Asia. Every corridor, gallery, and tower reflected the empire's dedication to excellence and its ability to marshal immense resources toward a singular vision. The temple also tells a story of human ambition and endurance, transporting massive sandstone blocks, carving intricate reliefs, and constructing towering spires required enormous coordination. Workers were organized in teams, overseen by skilled architects and religious officials. The project spanned decades, possibly longer than a single reign, reflecting a civilization capable of planning across generations. Angkor Wat was a labor of faith, power, and legacy, designed to endure long after the king who commissioned it had passed. Angkor Wat's enduring legacy also lies in its adaptability. While originally Hindu, it later became a center of Theravada Buddhism. Its halls, carvings, and sanctuaries were repurposed to serve changing spiritual and cultural needs, allowing the temple to remain relevant even as the Khmer Empire declined. Today, it stands not only as a relic of a lost empire, but as a living site of worship, connecting modern Cambodia to its past in a deeply tangible way. Beyond its architecture, Angkor Wat embodies a philosophical statement, the intertwining of earthly and divine power, the ambition to leave a lasting legacy, and the belief that human endeavor, aligned with cosmic order, can achieve immortality. It reminds us that empires are measured not just in land or armies, but in visions realized through creativity, faith, and sheer determination. Angkor Wat continues to captivate the world because it is more than stone, it is a mirror of human aspiration. Standing in its shadow, visitors feel the ambition of a king, the skill of thousands of workers, and the devotion of a civilization that sought to align itself with the universe itself. It is a jewel of the Khmer Empire not merely because of its beauty, but because it represents the apex of political, spiritual, and cultural power. The story of Angkor Wat teaches a powerful lesson. True greatness lies not only in conquest or wealth, but in the ability to manifest ideas into enduring symbols. This temple is proof that an empire's ambition can literally reshape the landscape, influence generations, and leave a legacy that centuries of jungle, war, and neglect cannot erase. The Khmer Empire did not rise to greatness by temples alone. Behind the grandeur of Angkor and the spiritual authority of its kings lay a formidable military machine capable of projecting power across Southeast Asia. Conquests, diplomacy, and strategic warfare were the engines that fueled expansion, secured trade routes, and ensured the empire's survival for centuries. Understanding the Khmer military is essential to understanding the empire itself, its successes, its vulnerabilities, and the ambitious vision that allowed a jungle kingdom to dominate a vast region. Khmer military power was deeply intertwined with geography. The empire's core around Angkor relied heavily on rice cultivation and a sophisticated hydraulic system. This provided food security and population growth, which in turn allowed the kingdom to support large standing armies. Soldiers were not just warriors, they were citizens mobilized through a system of obligation to the king. Villagers, artisans, and laborers could be conscripted for campaigns, reflecting the intimate connection between the empire's agricultural, spiritual, and military systems. Without this foundation, Khmer conquests would have been impossible. The composition of the Khmer army was impressive for its time. Infantry formed the backbone, often equipped with bows, spears, and swords. Elephants were a particularly significant asset. War elephants could charge enemy lines, break fortifications, and inspire fear. These beasts were armored and trained for combat, turning them into both psychological and physical weapons. Cavalry, though limited by terrain, supplemented the infantry, while archers provided ranged support. The army's organization was flexible, capable of both defending the homeland and projecting power into neighboring regions. Khmer warfare combined strategy, engineering, and logistics. Campaigns often involved careful planning, constructing roads and bridges to move troops, building temporary fortifications, and managing supply lines across forests, rivers, and mountains. Kings understood that victory depended not only on strength, but on coordination and planning, a reflection of the empire's broader administrative sophistication. Battles were not haphazard skirmishes, they were calculated exercises in strategy and resource management. Conquests were motivated by multiple factors. Expanding territories secured access to trade routes, fertile land, and tributary states. Subjugating neighboring kingdoms such as Champa in modern Vietnam or smaller Thai and Lao polities allowed the Khmer to control strategic points, levy tributes, and demonstrate dominance. These campaigns also reinforced the divine authority of the king. The more lands conquered, the greater the perception of the ruler's mandate from the gods. Success on the battlefield was as much a spiritual statement as a political one. One of the most remarkable aspects of Khmer warfare was their integration of engineering into military operations. The same hydraulic and infrastructure expertise used for agriculture was adapted for war. Canals could facilitate troop movements, reservoirs could sustain long campaigns, and temporary fortifications could be constructed with remarkable speed. This ability to manipulate the environment gave the Khmer an advantage over less organized neighbors and allowed for campaigns deep into foreign territory. However, warfare was not without its challenges. The dense jungles and seasonal flooding of Southeast Asia made campaigns difficult and sometimes unpredictable. Disease, fatigue, and supply issues often claimed as many lives as enemy combat. The Khmer learned to adapt, timing campaigns to the dry season and utilizing local knowledge. Leadership and planning were crucial. A poor campaign could weaken the empire, while a successful one could solidify the king's reputation for generations. The psychological impact of conquest cannot be overstated. Khmer victories were commemorated in bas-reliefs and inscriptions, reinforcing the image of a divine king leading a victorious army. Soldiers returned not just with spoils, but with stories that cemented loyalty and morale. The empire used these victories to assert dominance diplomatically, signaling to neighboring states that resistance was futile. Military success became intertwined with religious legitimacy, further reinforcing the centrality of the king's power. While conquest extended the empire's reach, the Khmer were also skilled diplomats, often combining warfare with strategic alliances. Marriages, tribute arrangements, and negotiated settlements helped integrate newly conquered territories without constant conflict. This blend of military and diplomatic strategy was a hallmark of Khmer governance, allowing the empire to maintain stability across diverse and often resistant populations. Khmer conquests also facilitated cultural diffusion. As armies moved through different regions, they brought with them religion, architecture, language, and administration. Temples and inscriptions appear in conquered territories, spreading the influence of Khmer civilization beyond its core. The empire's power was not just measured in land, but in its ability to project culture and ideology, leaving a lasting imprint on Southeast Asia. Yet, the art of war was a double-edged sword. Constant campaigns required immense resources and could strain the hydraulic systems, labor, and economy. External enemies, rebellions, or poor leadership could reverse gains quickly. Over time, the empire's military might, once a source of expansion, became harder to sustain, particularly as rival powers grew stronger and internal dissent increased. The legacy of Khmer warfare is a story of vision, organization, and adaptability. The empire's military was not merely an instrument of destruction, it was a tool for securing resources, projecting power, and reinforcing divine authority. From war elephants charging across fields to strategic campaigns in distant territories, the Khmer army exemplified how a jungle-based kingdom could rise to dominate a vast region. Ultimately, Khmer conquests were about more than territory. They were about creating an empire that could support monumental architecture, complex administration, and a vibrant culture. Each victory expanded not just the land under control, but the reach of Khmer civilization, allowing temples like Angkor Wat to rise, economies to flourish, and a legacy to endure long after the jungles swallowed cities whole. The Khmer lesson in warfare is clear. Strength alone does not create an empire. Strategy, logistics, and vision combined with military might are what turn ambition into history. The empire's conquests were the backbone of its greatness, securing resources, faith, and influence that would shape Southeast Asia for centuries. Imagine waking up every day to the sight of towering stone temples, their carved faces staring silently from the walls, spires reaching toward the sky, and massive courtyards echoing the chants of priests. For the people of Angkor, life was lived in the shadows of these stone giants, and it was a life of both wonder and relentless labor. Temples were the center of society, shaping the rhythms of daily existence, the economy, and the spiritual lives of every citizen. Yet beneath the awe-inspiring architecture, life for the common Khmer was far from easy. The majority of the population were farmers, bound to the land and the cycles of rice cultivation that sustained the empire. The Mekong and Tolu Sap rivers were lifelines, but the work was grueling. Fields had to be prepared, planted, flooded, and harvested in accordance with seasonal patterns. The empire's hydraulic systems, including canals and reservoirs, were marvels of engineering, but they required constant maintenance. Villagers labored to repair dikes, clear canals, and manage water flow tasks that were both essential to survival and imposed as obligations by the king's centralized authority. Life was physically demanding, but it also tied people directly into the functioning of the empire. Beyond agriculture, many Khmer people were involved in construction and craftsmanship. Building temples was not the work of a few specialists. Thousands of laborers, artisans, and stonemasons were mobilized for decades-long projects. Quarrying sandstone, transporting massive blocks across rivers, and carving intricate bas-reliefs demanded skill, coordination, and endurance. Workers lived in temporary settlements near construction sites, often under the supervision of temple administrators or military overseers, Their labor was a form of service to the gods and to the king, reinforcing the intertwining of religious devotion and state control. For artisans and sculptors, life was different, yet no less demanding. They were the creators of the empire's cultural identity, shaping temples, statues, and carvings that would outlast generations. These artists followed strict conventions and cosmological guidelines. Each depiction had symbolic meaning. Gods, kings, warriors, or mythical creatures were rendered not for aesthetic pleasure alone, but to communicate religious, political, and moral messages. An error could be seen as an insult to the divine, or a disruption of cosmic order. Artistic life demanded precision, discipline, and devotion, and the work itself was a form of service to both ruler and deity. Religion permeated daily life. The Khmer were deeply devout, believing that their actions affected not only their earthly lives, but the cosmic balance of the universe. Temples were centers of worship, education, and social activity. Festivals, rituals, and offerings punctuated the calendar, and priests wielded significant influence. Ordinary citizens might not enter the inner sanctums of a temple, but they participated in ceremonies, observed processions, and supported the temples through labor or tribute. The gods were present in every aspect of life, from agriculture and construction to governance and justice. Life in Angkor was also hierarchical. At the top were the king and his court, followed by nobles, administrators, priests, and military officials. Below them were commoners, whose labor and compliance sustained the empire. While social mobility was limited, the system provided structure and predictability. Tributes, service, and participation in state projects were expected, but they also granted protection and access to the empire's resources. In this way, daily life was both constrained and supported by the grand system surrounding them. The scale of Angkor's urban planning affected everyday existence. Roads, bridges, and canals connected settlements, allowing trade, communication, and troop movements. Markets thrived near temples and urban centers, where goods ranging from rice and fish to textiles and ceramics were exchanged. Merchants and artisans benefited from the empire's wealth and stability, yet their fortunes were always linked to the ruler's success and the empire's stability. Life was an intricate dance between opportunity and obligation. Despite the splendor and organization, life could be harsh. Floods, droughts, disease, and social unrest were constant threats. The same hydraulic systems that allowed agriculture to flourish could fail, devastating crops and triggering famine. Labor demands could be grueling, and those who resisted faced punishment. Yet the Khmer people persevered, finding meaning in work, religion, and community, while contributing to an empire whose monuments would endure long after their own lives ended. Children were educated through apprenticeship, learning the skills of farming, crafts, or temple service from elders. Knowledge of irrigation, religious ritual, and construction techniques was passed down, ensuring the survival of both practical and cultural wisdom. In this way, life in the shadows of stone giants was also a life of learning, where the past and present converged, and the future of the empire was literally built by its people. Women in Khmer society held important roles, though their lives were defined by both family and religion. Some women served in temples, participating in rituals or crafting ceremonial objects. Others managed households, fields, or small businesses. While the hierarchy favored men in positions of political power, women contributed to the cultural and economic vitality of the empire. Their labor and devotion were integral to sustaining daily life and supporting the grandeur of Angkor. The psychological impact of living amidst monumental temples cannot be underestimated. Citizens were constantly reminded of divine order and royal authority. From childhood, people were immersed in a world where the king was both protector and divine representative, and temples were more than buildings, they were symbols of the universe itself. The physical environment shaped thought, behavior, and ambition, ensuring that citizens internalized the values and hierarchy of the empire. Yet there was beauty and wonder in this life. Festivals were vibrant affairs with music, dance, and religious ceremonies filling the temple courtyards. Artistic expression thrived, storytelling through sculpture and ritual preserved history, and shared labor fostered a sense of community. Life in the shadow of stone giants was not only one of duty and survival, it was a life deeply intertwined with spirituality, culture, and the extraordinary vision of a civilization that sought to harmonize humanity with the divine. In essence, the Khmer people were the lifeblood of the empire. The temples, canals, and cities of Angkor would have meant nothing without the labor, faith, and ingenuity of ordinary citizens. Their lives remind us that great civilizations are built by people who toil quietly, often unnoticed, yet whose contributions resonate for centuries. The grandeur of Angkor and the Khmer Empire is inseparable from the sweat, devotion, and resilience of those who lived in its shadow. If there is one thing that allowed the Khmer Empire to flourish, it was water, or more accurately, the Khmer mastery over it. Angkor at its peak was not only a city of temples and kings, but also the epicenter of a hydraulic civilization that stretched across hundreds of square kilometers. Rice fields, reservoirs, canals, and moats were not just practical necessities. They were feats of engineering that supported population growth, economic power, and the grandeur of the empire. Understanding Angkor's water management is understanding the backbone of Khmer dominance. The foundation of the system was the Tonle Sap Lake, Southeast Asia's largest freshwater body. Seasonal floods caused the lake to expand dramatically, nourishing the surrounding plains. The Khmer recognized this as both a blessing and a challenge. Too little water and crops failed, too much and villages drowned. Ingeniously, they constructed an intricate network of canals, dikes, and reservoirs, known as barrages, to regulate water flow. These structures could store water during the rainy season and distribute it during droughts, ensuring a reliable supply for rice cultivation year-round. This innovation made the Khmer Empire one of the most productive agricultural societies of its time. The largest of these reservoirs, the West Barrage, measures an astonishing 8 by 2 kilometers. Imagine a man-made lake created without modern machinery, carved out by thousands of laborers using only manual tools. It wasn't merely functional, it was symbolic. These vast water bodies mirrored the oceans surrounding Mount Meru, reflecting the empire's cosmology. In this way, engineering and spirituality intertwined. Water management was both a technical achievement and a manifestation of divine order. Canals connected the reservoirs to rice paddies, temples, and urban centers. These waterways facilitated irrigation, but also acted as transportation routes. Boats could move goods, people, and even building materials across the empire, reducing reliance on overland transport in difficult terrain. The Khmer used this system to mobilize labor and resources efficiently, a logistical advantage that strengthened both their economy and military campaigns. Without this mastery of hydraulics, the temples, palaces, and sprawling cities of Angkor would never have been possible. The engineering wasn't limited to irrigation. The Khmer also constructed flood defenses, drainage systems, and urban planning layouts that optimized water use. Entire cities were built to withstand seasonal variations, with temples and administrative buildings positioned strategically. Engineers carefully considered topography, gravity, and seasonal patterns to create a system that could sustain one of the largest pre-industrial populations in the world. Scholars today marvel at how Angkor could feed possibly 1 million people, rivaling contemporaneous civilizations in China and India. But Angkor's innovation went beyond practical engineering. The Khmer demonstrated advanced knowledge of materials and construction techniques. Reservoir walls were often reinforced with laterite and sandstone, preventing erosion and collapse. Canals were lined and graded to control water flow. Bridges and roads integrated with these systems allowed armies, merchants, and citizens to move efficiently, illustrating that infrastructure, military strategy, and economy were inseparably linked. This system was also a tool of political control. By managing water, the king controlled life itself. Farmers depended on the canals and reservoirs to survive. Temple administrators oversaw maintenance, reinforcing the hierarchical structure of society. Water management was not just an engineering feat, it was a mechanism of governance, ensuring that loyalty to the central authority was both practical and symbolic. However, the very system that enabled Angkor's prosperity would later contribute to its vulnerability. Over-reliance on massive hydraulic infrastructure made the empire susceptible to environmental stress. Droughts, floods, or neglect could disrupt agriculture, weakening the economy and causing social unrest. Evidence from archaeological and sediment studies suggests that climate variability and possibly prolonged droughts played a role in the empire's decline. The same ingenuity that fueled expansion could not fully shield Angkor from nature's unpredictability. The Khmer approach to engineering was also tied to religion and cosmology. Water was sacred, representing life, fertility, and the cosmic ocean surrounding Mount Meru. Reservoirs and moats were more than practical. They were spiritual. Temples were often surrounded by water, reinforcing the king's divine connection and reminding citizens of the ordered universe they inhabited. In this way, innovation and faith were inseparable, a hallmark of Khmer civilization. Angkor's hydraulic marvels also facilitated economic growth. Surplus rice supported urban populations, freed labor for temple construction, and allowed trade to flourish. Merchants and artisans benefited from the abundance, producing goods for local consumption and regional exchange. The ability to reliably feed large populations created social stability and reinforced the empire's power. This delicate balance between engineering, economy, and social cohesion was the backbone of Khmer dominance. Even today, the scale and sophistication of Angkor's water systems continue to inspire awe. Modern technology, including LiDAR mapping, reveals extensive canal networks, reservoirs, and urban layouts previously hidden beneath the jungle canopy. These discoveries underscore the Khmer Empire's unparalleled ability to manipulate their environment with precision, foresight, and ingenuity. The story of Angkor's engineering is ultimately a story of human ambition and adaptation. It demonstrates that empires rise not only through conquest and religion, but through the ability to master nature, harness resources, and organize societies on a massive scale. The Khmer built an empire that literally reshaped the landscape, turning rivers, lakes, and plains into engines of civilization. In the shadows of stone temples and within the flowing canals, we see the Khmer legacy, a civilization that combined faith, innovation, and governance to create one of history's most remarkable urban achievements. Their hydraulic systems were more than practical. They were a reflection of vision, power, and the human drive to leave a lasting mark. Religion was the heartbeat of the Khmer Empire, the invisible thread that connected kings, priests, and commoners alike. It shaped politics, architecture, daily life, and even warfare. The Khmer didn't just worship gods, they built their empire around them, weaving faith into the very fabric of society. To understand Angkor and its civilization, one must first understand the profound role religion played in legitimizing power, shaping culture, and guiding the people's daily existence. The Khmer initially embraced Hinduism, imported from India centuries earlier, but adapted it to local traditions. Their kings identified themselves with the gods, particularly Shiva, the destroyer and transformer, and Vishnu, the preserver. By associating themselves with divinity, rulers claimed not only political authority, but also cosmic legitimacy. The king was seen as a living god, a bridge between the earthly realm and the divine order of the universe. This concept, called Devaraja, or God-King, became central to Khmer governance and temple culture. Temples were more than places of worship. They were ritual centers, administrative hubs, and symbolic representations of the cosmos. Each temple was aligned with celestial patterns and designed to mirror Mount Meru, the mythical center of the universe. Moats symbolized oceans, and concentric galleries reflected the layers of heaven. By physically structuring their cities around spiritual ideals, the Khmer reinforced the king's divine authority and reminded citizens that their lives existed within a cosmic framework. Every ritual performed, every offering made, was a reaffirmation of this divine order. Rituals were elaborate, deeply symbolic, and often public. Priests conducted ceremonies to bless temples, inaugurate kings, or mark seasonal changes. Festivals punctuated the year, drawing thousands to participate in processions, dance, and music. Ordinary citizens might offer rice, flowers, or labor to temples, contributing both to spiritual practice and state stability. Religion was not just personal, it was a social glue, binding communities together while reinforcing the hierarchical order of the empire. Buddhism also played a critical role, particularly Mahayana and later Theravada traditions. While Hinduism dominated in the early centuries, Buddhism gradually gained influence, especially during periods of political transition. Buddhist philosophy complemented Hindu practices, offering moral guidance, ethical codes, and paths toward enlightenment. Temples began to house statues of Buddha alongside Hindu deities, reflecting a syncretism that allowed the empire to adapt to evolving beliefs. This religious flexibility helped maintain social cohesion even amid political change. Religious art and iconography were central to Khmer culture. Carvings on temple walls depicted mythical battles, divine processions, and stories from the Ramayana and Mahabharata. Every figure had meaning, from the posture of a god to the expression on a dancer's face. These reliefs didn't just decorate, they taught, inspired, and reinforced societal values. Citizens, even those who could not read, understood these visual narratives as lessons in morality, duty, and devotion. Religion became both education and governance. Rituals also had political significance. Coronations, military campaigns, and diplomatic missions were sanctified by priests, emphasizing that the king acted on divine authority. Conquests were framed as the will of the gods, and loyalty was a sacred duty. Disobedience wasn't just rebellion, it was spiritual transgression. Religion thus became a powerful tool to maintain order, justify expansion, and integrate diverse populations under a single ideological framework. The Khmer also believed in the spiritual power of water, linking their hydraulic innovations to religious practice. Reservoirs, moats, and canals weren't merely functional, they were sacred, representing life, fertility, and cosmic balance. Rituals were performed at these sites to ensure bountiful harvests, prevent floods, or honor deities. Religion and engineering, faith and practicality were intertwined, reflecting a civilization where the sacred and the mundane were inseparable. Priests and religious elites wielded immense influence. They advised kings, managed temple lands, oversaw labor, and maintained records. Their authority extended into daily life, guiding moral conduct, education, and economic activity. Ordinary citizens might rarely see the king, but they were constantly influenced by priests and temple rituals, ensuring that religious and political authority reinforced one another. Religious devotion also shaped Khmer art, music, and literature. Temples hosted performances, storytelling, and recitations of sacred texts. Artisans created statues, reliefs, and ceremonial objects imbued with spiritual meaning. Even mundane activities, like farming or building, were framed as offerings to the gods, giving ordinary labor cosmic significance. In this way, religion permeated every facet of life, making faith both a personal and communal experience. Yet religion wasn't static. Over centuries, Khmer rulers adapted beliefs to meet changing political and social needs. Hindu gods gave way to Buddha images, local animist traditions merged with imported philosophies, and rituals evolved to maintain relevance. This adaptability helped sustain the empire for centuries, even amid environmental, military, and political challenges. The Khmer Empire teaches us that religion is far more than a set of beliefs. It is a framework for governance, a unifying cultural force, and a source of identity. Through temples, rituals, and cosmic symbolism, the Khmer aligned earthly life with divine order, creating an empire where faith, politics, and daily life were inseparable. The temples weren't just sacred, they were strategic instruments of power, and the gods were ever-present witnesses to the rise, rule, and legacy of the Khmer kings. Religion, rituals, and devotion allowed the Khmer Empire to achieve stability, cohesion, and cultural brilliance. It transformed ordinary labor into sacred service, conquest into divine duty, and architecture into eternal testimony. In the shadows of towering temples, the people of Angkor lived lives steeped in meaning, guided by the gods, and bound to the vision of kings who ruled as living embodiments of the divine. If any ruler embodies the zenith of the Khmer Empire, it is Jayavarman VII, a king whose life reads like an epic tale of ambition, warfare, devotion, and visionary construction. Ascending the throne in the late 12th century, he inherited an empire threatened by internal strife and external enemies, particularly the Champa kingdom to the east. Yet Jayavarman VII did not merely defend his inheritance, he expanded it, transformed it, and left a legacy that reshaped the Khmer world forever. His reign is remembered as a golden age, a period when warfare, religion, and monumental architecture converged to produce one of history's most remarkable civilizations. Jayavarman VII was first and foremost a warrior king. Early in his reign, Champa forces invaded Angkor, capturing territories and threatening the empire's survival. Rather than retreating or negotiating, Jayavarman VII launched a series of decisive campaigns to reclaim lost lands. His military strategy combined innovation, discipline, and psychological tactics, incorporating elephants, infantry, and strategic fortifications. Victory was not merely about territory, it was about restoring legitimacy and divine authority. By successfully defeating Champa, he reinforced his image as a god-king ordained to protect and expand the empire. But Jayavarman VII's vision went beyond conquest. He understood that lasting power required infrastructure, public welfare, and monumental construction. Unlike many rulers who focused solely on palaces or temples, he built hospitals, rest houses, roads, and reservoirs, improving the lives of ordinary citizens while consolidating the empire's control over its vast territories. These projects were unprecedented in scale, demonstrating a ruler who combined military prowess with a sophisticated understanding of governance and social responsibility. The centerpiece of his architectural legacy is Bayon Temple, located in the heart of Angkor Thom, his grand capital city. Bayon is famous for its towering stone faces, serene yet inscrutable, gazing in all directions. Scholars believe these faces represent a combination of Jayavarman VII himself and the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, symbolizing the king's watchfulness, compassion, and divine authority. The temple's bas-reliefs depict historical events, daily life, and military campaigns, merging art, history, and propaganda in a way that few civilizations could achieve. Under Jayavarman VII, the Khmer Empire reached a cultural and religious zenith. He embraced Mahayana Buddhism, marking a significant shift from the predominantly Hindu traditions of earlier rulers. Yet his approach was inclusive. He respected Hindu deities while promoting Buddhist principles of compassion and service. Temples became centers not only of worship, but also of education, healthcare, and community life. His Buddhist-inspired policies emphasized public welfare, a rare and visionary approach for a medieval ruler. One of the most striking features of Jayavarman VII's reign was his urban planning and hydraulic engineering. He expanded the city of Angkor Thom with wide roads, walls, moats, and reservoirs, ensuring both defense and prosperity. Canals connected agricultural lands to urban centers, supporting population growth and the empire's economy. Roads linked remote villages, facilitating communication, troop movements, and trade. His reign demonstrates a ruler who understood that infrastructure and logistics were as critical to power as armies and religion. Jayavarman VII also used architecture and temples as instruments of political consolidation. By commissioning massive construction projects across the empire, he created work for thousands, strengthened loyalty, and displayed his authority. Temples and monuments were not just religious, they were statements of power, enduring symbols of the king's legitimacy and vision. In every city, town, and village, the presence of his projects reinforced his role as the protector and benefactor of his people. Despite the grandeur, his reign faced challenges. Governing a vast and diverse empire required constant vigilance. Rebellions, administrative inefficiencies, and environmental constraints tested his leadership. Yet, Jayavarman VII navigated these complexities with a combination of religious authority, military skill, and visionary governance, leaving an empire stronger and more unified than when he inherited it. Jayavarman VII's legacy also highlights the human dimension of leadership. He was not content to rule from distant palaces. He engaged with the empire's people, built hospitals to treat the sick, and developed infrastructure that benefited commoners. This combination of strength, vision, and compassion is what set him apart from other rulers of his era. He demonstrated that true greatness comes from balancing power, innovation, and service. His death marked the end of the empire's greatest era, yet the monuments, temples, and urban systems he established endured. Bayon, Angkor Thom, and the many hospitals, roads, and reservoirs built under his reign stand as testaments to a king who understood that an empire's strength lies in the alignment of faith, society, and infrastructure. Jayavarman VII teaches a timeless lesson. Leadership is not only about conquest, but about vision, service, and legacy. Through his military victories, monumental architecture, and commitment to his people, he transformed the Khmer Empire into a civilization that would be remembered centuries later. Even as the jungles eventually reclaimed much of Angkor, the spirit of his reign continues to resonate in every stone, canal, and carving that survives. In the life of Jayavarman VII, we see the perfect synthesis of warrior, builder, and saint. His reign exemplifies the potential of a leader who wields power not solely for domination, but to protect, inspire, and elevate civilization. The Khmer Empire under him was at once a religious, cultural and political marvel, a beacon of human ingenuity and ambition in the heart of Southeast Asia. The Khmer Empire was not an isolated kingdom hidden deep in the jungles of Southeast Asia. It was a vibrant hub of commerce, diplomacy and cultural exchange, stretching influence far beyond its borders. Its wealth, power and stability allowed it to interact with distant polities, from China to India and even across maritime Southeast Asia. Understanding trade and diplomacy is essential to understanding how the Khmer maintained their empire, projected influence and left a lasting mark on the region. Agriculture was the engine of the Khmer economy, but trade fueled its expansion. Surplus rice supported urban populations and freed labor for artisans, construction and administrative work. In turn, these goods, along with luxury items like silk, ceramics and spices, were traded with neighboring kingdoms. Rivers, canals and roads facilitated the movement of goods, while maritime routes connected the Khmer to ports in Champa, Java, Sumatra and beyond. Traders, both local and foreign, played a crucial role in the empire's prosperity. Markets thrived in urban centers, and Angkor became a magnet for merchants, travelers, and diplomats. Trade was not limited to commodities. The Khmer exported knowledge, culture, and religion. Temples, inscriptions, and architectural styles influenced neighboring polities, while ideas from India and China filtered into Angkor. This two-way exchange enriched the empire, fostering innovations in art, religion, and governance. The Khmer were not passive recipients. They adapted and transformed foreign influences into a distinctly Khmer identity. This cultural diplomacy was as powerful as military conquest, expanding influence without drawing a sword. Diplomacy was equally crucial. The Khmer maintained relations with powerful neighbors, negotiating alliances, tribute and marriages. Diplomatic missions were carefully orchestrated, often accompanied by gifts, religious artifacts, and ceremonial protocol. Envoys traveled to China, Champa, and other kingdoms, carrying messages that balanced power projection with negotiation. These relationships ensured access to trade routes, recognition of authority, and political stability. A well-timed treaty could secure borders, prevent costly wars, and enhance prestige. Tributary relationships were central to Khmer influence. Neighboring states, while retaining some autonomy, paid tribute to Angkor, acknowledging its dominance. Tribute could take the form of goods, labor, or military support. This system reinforced the king's image as a divinely sanctioned ruler, while also integrating peripheral regions into the empire's economic and political orbit. Diplomacy and tribute were therefore tools of governance, ensuring cohesion without the constant strain of direct conquest. Maritime trade expanded the empire's reach even further. Khmer merchants navigated rivers and coastal waters, exchanging rice, timber, ivory and precious stones for ceramics, metals and luxury goods. Ports in the Mekong Delta connected the empire to maritime Southeast Asia, India, and even China, creating a network of economic and cultural exchange. These routes were lifelines for the empire, sustaining urban centers, funding monumental construction, and facilitating the movement of ideas. Khmer influence can be seen in art, religion, and architecture beyond its core territories. Temples and inscriptions in Champa, Laos, and southern Thailand bear evidence of Khmer styles and religious practices. The empire's administrative systems, hydraulic engineering, and urban planning were also emulated by neighboring states. Khmer culture spread not by conquest alone but through soft power, trade, religion, and the prestige of monumental architecture. Cultural diplomacy was reinforced by religion. Buddhist and Hindu practices, temple architecture, and iconography traveled with traders and envoys, creating networks of shared belief that strengthened political and economic ties. Temples in distant lands mirrored Angkorian designs, linking the periphery to the central empire and reinforcing the authority of the Khmer king as both a political and spiritual leader. Yet, this expansion of influence required careful management. Trade routes had to be protected, diplomatic relationships maintained, and local rulers appeased. The Khmer demonstrated remarkable administrative sophistication, using taxation, tribute, and local governance structures to integrate distant regions. They combined force, persuasion, and religious legitimacy to maintain influence across a diverse and often fragmented landscape. The economic prosperity from trade fueled not only everyday life, but also monumental projects. Surplus wealth supported temple construction, urban expansion, and artistic innovation. Luxury items imported from abroad enriched the elite, while ordinary citizens benefited from markets, roads, and urban infrastructure. Commerce and culture were intertwined, creating a virtuous cycle where economic strength reinforced political and cultural dominance. Khmer diplomacy also involved strategic military posturing. Military campaigns were sometimes launched to secure trade routes or retaliate against rivals, ensuring that economic interests were protected. Success in diplomacy often depended on demonstrating the ability to enforce agreements, blending negotiation with the implicit threat of force. This combination of soft and hard power ensured the empire's influence endured even as neighbors fluctuated in strength. The legacy of Khmer trade and diplomacy is clear. The empire's reach extended far beyond the borders of Angkor. Its cultural, religious, and economic influence shaped Southeast Asia for centuries, creating networks that persisted long after political control waned. The Khmer Empire was a hub where commerce, culture, and diplomacy converged, demonstrating that power is not measured solely by armies or territory, but by the ability to connect, influence, and sustain relationships across vast regions. In essence, the Khmer lesson in trade and diplomacy is timeless. An empire thrives not only by conquest, but by strategic exchange, cultural influence, and the creation of systems that endure beyond the battlefield. By linking commerce, religion, and politics, the Khmer established an empire whose shadow extended across Southeast Asia, leaving a legacy that continues to captivate historians and travelers alike. Every empire, no matter how grand, faces the inevitability of decline. For the Khmer, Angkor, the jewel of their civilization, would eventually succumb to forces both external and internal. The fall of Angkor was not sudden. It was a slow unraveling, a combination of environmental challenges, political instability, military pressure, and economic strain. To understand how a city of such scale and sophistication could be abandoned, we must examine the complex web of factors that led to its desertion and the end of the Khmer Empire's golden era. One of the most significant factors was environmental stress. Angkor's hydraulic systems, the very marvels that had allowed the empire to flourish, were vulnerable to climate variability. Research suggests that prolonged droughts, alternating with severe flooding, disrupted the delicate balance of reservoirs, canals, and rice paddies. When water management failed, agriculture collapsed, food shortages spread, and the empire's urban population, once nourished by an abundance of rice, faced starvation. The very system that had symbolized human ingenuity became a source of vulnerability. Political instability compounded the crisis. After the death of visionary rulers like Jayavarman VII, the empire faced succession disputes and internal strife. Rival factions vied for power, weakening central authority and making coordinated management of the empire's resources increasingly difficult. Without strong leadership, the once organized workforce struggled to maintain irrigation systems, temples, and infrastructure. The king's ability to project both spiritual and political authority faltered, leaving the empire fragmented and vulnerable. External pressures also played a crucial role. Neighboring kingdoms, particularly Siam, Ayutthaya and Champa, became more aggressive as the Khmer weakened. Invasions, raids and territorial losses strained the empire's military and diverted resources from essential civic projects. Even with a formidable army, the Khmer could not simultaneously defend their borders, maintain internal order, and sustain monumental construction. Each defeat chipped away at the empire's prestige and control over peripheral regions. Economic factors further accelerated decline. Angkor's wealth was closely tied to agricultural surplus and trade. Disruptions in water management reduced crop yields, leading to famine and depopulation in some areas. Trade routes became less secure, and local economies weakened. Urban centers, dependent on a stable food supply, began to shrink. As the population declined, the labor force needed to sustain temples, roads, and reservoirs dwindled, creating a vicious cycle of decay. Social unrest emerged as a consequence. When resources became scarce, peasants and laborers were less able or willing to maintain the empire's vast infrastructure. Revolts, migrations, and localized conflicts further undermined the empire's cohesion. Angkor, once a bustling urban and spiritual hub, began to empty as citizens sought safety and sustenance elsewhere. Villages relocated, markets faltered, and temples were abandoned. The jungle slowly reclaimed streets, canals, and palaces, erasing human presence, but leaving the stone monuments as silent witnesses to a lost civilization. Religious shifts also played a role in the empire's decline. As the Theravada Buddhism gained prominence, the traditional Hindu-based political ideology of the Devaraja god-king weakened. Kings no longer wielded the same divine authority to mobilize labor and command loyalty for monumental projects. While Buddhism encouraged moral guidance and compassion, it lacked the centralized, coercive power that had driven Angkor's growth. Temples that once symbolized royal authority lost their political function, further eroding the cohesion of society. The sheer scale of Angkor became a liability as well. Maintaining a city that spanned hundreds of square kilometers, with elaborate irrigation systems, roads, and monumental architecture required constant organization and resources. Even small disruptions, be it climate, rebellion, or external attack, could have cascading effects. Once central authority weakened, the empire's complex infrastructure began to crumble under its own weight. By the 15th century, Angkor had largely been abandoned. Populations shifted to smaller, more defensible settlements along the Mekong River. Trade and governance moved toward Phnom Penh and other emerging centers. Temples fell into disrepair, canals silted up, and forests reclaimed streets and plazas. The empire that had once dominated Southeast Asia, boasting monumental temples, vast irrigation networks, and military might, became a ghost of its former self. Yet, the fall of Angkor was not complete erasure. The stone temples, reliefs, and urban footprints remained as enduring legacies of Khmer ingenuity and vision. Even as the city was overtaken by the jungle, travelers and chroniclers marveled at its scale. The abandonment of Angkor is a testament to both the fragility and resilience of civilizations, how they can achieve greatness but remain vulnerable to forces beyond their control. The decline of Angkor teaches profound lessons about human ambition, environmental limits, and the importance of governance. The Khmer Empire fell not solely to invaders or natural disasters, but because multiple pressures converged, overwhelming even the most sophisticated systems. It is a story of how grandeur, power, and ingenuity are remarkable but finite, and how empires must adapt continuously to survive. Today, Angkor stands as both a monument to human achievement and a cautionary tale. It reminds us that civilizations rise through vision, labor, and ingenuity, but they also fall when the balance between human ambition, environment, and society is disrupted. The temples that remain are silent witnesses to centuries of human endeavor, triumph, and vulnerability, echoing the story of a civilization that dared to align its life with the cosmos itself. For centuries after the Khmer abandoned Angkor, the city and its temples lay hidden beneath dense jungle. Trees swallowed stone walls, vines tangled with bas-reliefs, and wildlife reclaimed streets once walked by kings, priests, and peasants. To the outside world, the Khmer Empire seemed lost. Its stories and achievements faded into legend. Yet in the 19th century, Western explorers began to uncover the secrets of Angkor, sparking a fascination that would continue to this day and ensuring that the memory of the Khmer Empire would endure globally. The first Europeans to report on Angkor were missionaries and traders in the 16th and 17th centuries, but their accounts were vague and often tinged with myth. They heard of cities of stone, swallowed by the jungle, but few ventured deep enough to witness them firsthand. It wasn't until French explorers in the 19th century began systematic documentation that Angkor's scale and sophistication were truly recognized. Figures like Henri Mouhot, often credited with popularizing Angkor in Europe, marveled at its architecture, carvings, and hydraulic systems. He described Angkor Wat and Angkor Thom with awe, calling them unparalleled achievements of human creativity and ambition. Mouhot's writings captured the imagination of Europe, framing the Khmer as a lost civilization worthy of study and admiration. Western fascination with Angkor was fueled by its mystery and scale. Europeans could not fully comprehend how a civilization deep in the jungle had created such monumental structures without modern technology. The temple's intricate carvings, astronomical alignments, and sophisticated water management seemed almost otherworldly. To many, Angkor represented an exotic, forgotten world, a civilization that rivaled or even surpassed those of Greece, Rome, and Egypt in ingenuity and artistic achievement. This romanticized view captured the imagination of scholars, artists, and the public alike. Colonial interest played a role in Angkor's rediscovery and preservation. As France expanded its influence in Indochina, Angkor became a symbol of cultural heritage that tied Cambodia to European scholarly endeavors. French archaeologists and engineers began restoring temples, mapping the city, and documenting inscriptions. Their work, while sometimes flawed and controversial in approach, helped preserve Angkor for future generations. It also allowed historians to reconstruct the empire's history, shedding light on its rulers, religion, and achievements. Angkor's rediscovery also ignited archaeological innovation. Scholars used emerging methods in epigraphy, art history, and later aerial surveys to understand the city's layout and function. The advent of LiDAR technology in the 21st century revealed previously hidden canals, roads, and structures, dramatically expanding knowledge of the empire. What was once seen as scattered temple ruins is now recognized as part of a vast, highly organized urban and agricultural network. The rediscovery of Angkor transformed it from a mysterious ruin into one of the most studied and admired civilizations in world history. Western fascination was not merely academic. It became cultural and artistic inspiration. Angkor's towers, reliefs, and sculptures influenced European and global art, architecture, and literature. Romantic depictions of the temples appeared in paintings, books, and early travelogues, shaping how the world imagined the Khmer Empire. These portrayals though often tinged with exoticism, ensured that Angkor would remain a symbol of human ingenuity and lost grandeur. The rediscovery of Angkor also sparked tourism, which transformed both global and local perceptions of Cambodia. For the Khmer people, who had lived in the shadow of these ruins for centuries, European attention brought renewed pride and a connection to their own history. Over time, preservation efforts, guided by both Cambodian authorities and international organizations, have helped safeguard Angkor against natural decay, looting, and modernization. The site today stands not only as a testament to the Khmer, but also as a global heritage treasure. Yet, the Western fascination with Angkor is not without complexities. Colonial narratives often overshadowed indigenous understanding of Khmer history, and early interpretations sometimes framed the empire as mysterious or primitive until discovered by Europeans. Modern scholarship strives to correct these biases, emphasizing the Khmer as an innovative, sophisticated civilization whose achievements were entirely their own. Rediscovery, therefore, is not just about uncovering ruins. It is about reclaiming history and understanding the agency of the Khmer people. Angkor's story of rediscovery teaches a timeless lesson. Civilizations may fade, but their legacy can endure through monuments, culture, and scholarship. The jungle may hide a city, centuries may erase memory, but human curiosity combined with respect for the past ensures that greatness is remembered. Western explorers may have brought Angkor to global attention, but it is the ingenuity of the Khmer Empire itself that continues to captivate and inspire. Today, Angkor stands as a bridge between past and present, between local pride and global fascination. Its rediscovery reminds us that history is never truly lost. It waits for the eyes, minds, and hearts willing to seek it, to understand it, and to honor the achievements of those who came before. When we speak of the Khmer Empire today, what lingers in memory is more than stone temples swallowed by the jungle. It is the legacy of a civilization that transformed Southeast Asia through art, culture, and innovation. The Khmer did not simply build, they created a world, a civilization that harmonized religion, governance, and daily life, leaving behind monuments, stories, and traditions that continue to inspire awe centuries later. At the heart of this legacy is art and architecture. The temples of Angkor, particularly Angkor Wat and Bayon, are masterpieces of design and engineering. They are not merely structures, they are cosmic representations designed to reflect the universe itself. Towers symbolize Mount Meru, the home of the gods. Moats represent oceans, galleries mirror the layers of the cosmos. Bas-reliefs narrate epic tales from the Ramayana, Mahabharata, and Buddhist Jataka stories, blending mythology with history, moral instruction, and political propaganda. Every carving, every statue, every corridor tells a story about the Khmer worldview, their values, and their mastery of craftsmanship. The Khmer also left a lasting imprint on urban planning and engineering. The hydraulic systems of Angkor, with its reservoirs, canals, and roads, were not only feats of ingenuity, but also reflections of a civilization that understood the delicate balance between nature, society, and technology. Cities were carefully planned, combining administrative centers, religious sites, and agricultural infrastructure. This integration of engineering, governance, and religion created a sustainable urban ecosystem that supported a population of hundreds of thousands, a remarkable achievement for the medieval world. Religion and culture were inseparable. Hinduism and Buddhism infused everyday life, from the king's governance to farmers' rituals in the fields. Temples were cultural hubs, hosting education, arts, and community events. Dance, music, and storytelling flourished, preserving myths, history, and moral lessons for generations. This cultural richness allowed the Khmer to maintain social cohesion, integrate conquered peoples, and reinforce the divine authority of their rulers. Language and inscriptions are another testament to Khmer civilization. Stone inscriptions recorded laws, religious texts, and royal decrees, offering historians a window into the political and spiritual life of the empire. These texts reveal an advanced administrative system, a deep understanding of social hierarchy, and a culture that valued both literacy and record-keeping. Through inscriptions, the Khmer communicated not only to their contemporaries, but to posterity, leaving a permanent record of their civilization. Trade and diplomacy also formed part of the Khmer legacy. By connecting Southeast Asia through commerce, tribute and cultural exchange, the empire influenced neighboring regions. Khmer art, architecture, and religion spread to Laos, Thailand, Vietnam, and beyond. These cultural imprints endured even after political control waned, demonstrating that soft power, through culture and innovation, can outlast armies and borders. The Khmer Empire's human legacy is equally profound. Ordinary citizens, artisans, priests, and farmers all contributed to the civilization's enduring achievements. The temples, reservoirs, and roads are not just testaments to kings. They reflect the collective labor, faith, and ingenuity of thousands who toiled, worshipped, and lived within the empire's intricate social structure. Without the contributions of these people, Angkor's grandeur would never have existed. Music, dance, and theater continue to preserve Khmer culture. Traditional forms, such as the Apsara dance, inspired by temple carvings, survive today as living art. These performances are not mere entertainment. They are cultural memory, carrying forward spiritual, historical, and aesthetic traditions of the Khmer. Through art and performance, the empire's worldview remains vibrant and accessible to modern audiences. Even the Khmer language and writing system have persisted, influencing modern Cambodian culture. While political power shifted and cities were abandoned, the Khmer script, literature, and oral traditions carried the empire's intellectual and cultural achievements forward. The Khmer legacy is therefore living, not just archaeological, shaping identity, education, and national pride in Cambodia and the wider region. Perhaps most importantly, the Khmer Empire teaches us about vision and ambition. It demonstrates how a civilization can integrate religion, governance, engineering, and culture to create a society that thrives, inspires, and endures. Its achievements in architecture, urban planning, hydraulic engineering, and the arts continue to inform scholars, architects, and artists today. The empire's story reminds us that human creativity, when aligned with purpose and vision, can leave a mark on history that lasts far beyond political power. In sum, the Khmer legacy is multifaceted. It is monumental and intimate, spiritual and practical, ancient and living. From the towering temples of Angkor to the intricate dance forms still performed today, from the sophisticated irrigation networks to enduring inscriptions, the Khmer Empire left an indelible imprint on history. Its civilization was not just a collection of kings, wars, and buildings. It was a dynamic, creative, and resilient society whose echoes still shape the cultural and historical landscape of Southeast Asia. Centuries after the Khmer Empire faded into history, Angkor emerged from the jungle as a symbol of national pride, cultural identity, and global fascination. Today, it is not just an archaeological site. It is a living testament to the ingenuity, spirituality, and resilience of a civilization that shaped Southeast Asia. Modern Cambodia owes much of its cultural and historical identity to Angkor, making its preservation, tourism, and study a matter of both heritage and survival. Angkor was formally rediscovered by Western explorers in the 19th century, but for Cambodians it was never forgotten. Generations knew the ruins and passed down stories, legends, and knowledge of the temple's significance. Yet, after decades of colonial rule, civil unrest and war, including the devastating Khmer Rouge era, the country faced immense challenges in safeguarding its cultural treasures. Temples fell into disrepair, looting stripped artifacts, and the natural environment threatened the structures. Preserving Angkor became a race against both time and circumstance. Efforts to restore and protect Angkor have been extensive. Since the 20th century, organizations like UNESCO, along with Cambodian authorities, have spearheaded projects to stabilize temples, document inscriptions, and study the city's intricate water management systems. Modern technology, including 3D mapping, LiDAR scanning, and structural analysis, allows archaeologists to reconstruct Angkor's original layout and understand its hydraulic networks. These initiatives not only preserve monuments, but also reveal the astounding scale and sophistication of Khmer urban planning. Tourism has played a crucial role in Angkor's modern life. Millions of visitors from around the world flock to Angkor Wat, Bayer, and other sites each year, drawn by the majestic architecture, intricate carvings, and historical significance. Tourism generates revenue that supports conservation, local communities, and the Cambodian economy. Guides, artisans, and local businesses rely on this influx, creating a bridge between ancient history and modern livelihoods. However, tourism also presents challenges. Foot traffic, environmental impact, and commercialization threaten the integrity of the ruins, requiring careful management and sustainable practices. Preservation of Angkor is not only about physical conservation, but also about cultural revival. The site continues to be a spiritual center for Cambodians, hosting religious ceremonies, festivals, and rituals. Traditional dance, music, and crafts inspired by the temples are taught and performed, keeping Khmer culture alive and accessible. These practices ensure that Angkor is not merely a tourist attraction, but a living testament to the values, beliefs, and artistry of the Khmer civilization. International cooperation has been vital in safeguarding Angkor. Organizations from Japan, France, Germany, and other nations have contributed expertise, funding, and technology. This collaboration underscores the global significance of Angkor as World Heritage, emphasizing that preserving history is a shared human responsibility. The temples are more than Cambodian treasures. They are part of the world's collective memory of human achievement. Education and research continue to expand our understanding of Angkor. Archaeologists, historians, and engineers study the temple's inscriptions, water systems, and construction techniques. LiDAR technology has unveiled previously hidden canals, roads, and settlements, revealing Angkor as a sprawling urban and agricultural network, far more sophisticated than previously imagined. These discoveries challenge old narratives and highlight the Khmer Empire's innovation, adaptability, and administrative brilliance. Modern Angkor also inspires art, literature, and scholarship. Writers, filmmakers, and visual artists draw from the temple's history, legends, and aesthetics, sharing the Khmer story with global audiences. This cultural dissemination keeps the legacy alive, encouraging respect and fascination for a civilization that endured for centuries. Angkor serves as a symbol of human creativity and resilience, bridging past and present in a way few other sites can. Yet, challenges remain. Climate change, urban expansion, and tourism pressure threaten the fragile ruins. Sustainable practices, careful management, and continued international support are essential to ensure that Angkor survives for future generations. Preserving Angkor is not merely about stone, It is about protecting knowledge, history, and identity. Each temple, carving and canal carries centuries of innovation, belief, and culture that cannot be replaced. Ultimately, Angkor in modern Cambodia embodies a story of resilience, rediscovery, and pride. From a jungle-swallowed ruin to a world-renowned heritage site, it represents the enduring spirit of the Khmer people and the civilization they built. By preserving Angkor, Cambodia not only honors its past, but also inspires the present and future, reminding the world of the ingenuity, artistry, and vision of one of history's greatest empires. The story of the Khmer Empire is more than a chronicle of kings, temples, and conquests. It is a mirror of human ambition, creativity, and vulnerability, offering timeless lessons about power, governance, culture, and legacy. From the rise of Angkor to its fall, the empire teaches us how human societies can achieve greatness and how even the most brilliant civilizations remain susceptible to forces beyond their control. One of the clearest lessons is the power of vision and leadership. Leaders like Jevaman VII show that a single individual, guided by strategy, faith, and ambition, can transform an entire society. His reign combined military prowess, infrastructure, religious devotion, and care for the populace. He reminds us that leadership is not merely about ruling, but about envisioning the future, mobilizing resources, and inspiring people toward a common purpose. Great civilizations are built not by chance, but by leaders who balance power with service and ambition with compassion. The Khmer Empire also demonstrates the importance of innovation and adaptability. Angkor's hydraulic systems, urban planning, and monumental architecture reveal a civilization capable of engineering feats that supported millions of people, but the eventual decline highlights a critical lesson. Reliance on complex systems without adaptive strategies can create vulnerability. Civilizations thrive when they innovate, but survival depends on flexibility in the face of environmental, political, and social challenges. Religion and culture in the Khmer Empire illustrate another fundamental truth. Societies are strongest when beliefs, governance, and daily life are integrated. The Khmer aligned spiritual ideals with political authority, infrastructure, and societal norms. Temples were not only religious centers, but also hubs of education, administration, and community life. Their art, dance, and literature preserved cultural identity, demonstrating that culture is both a glue that binds societies and a beacon that outlives them. The Khmer story also teaches about the fragility of power. Even an empire as advanced as Angkor eventually succumbed to environmental stress, political instability, and external pressures. This reminds us that no civilization, however sophisticated, is invincible. Success must be continuously maintained, and societies must anticipate challenges, whether climate, rebellion, or economic strain, to endure. Power without foresight is temporary. Legacy requires resilience. Another profound lesson is the value of collective effort. Angkor was not built by kings alone. It required thousands of artisans, laborers, priests, and farmers. The grandeur of temples, roads, and reservoirs depended on the skill, labor, and faith of ordinary people. History often celebrates rulers, but the Khmer remind us that civilization is a collective achievement, and the contributions of countless individuals shape the course of history. Rediscovery and preservation of Angkor further teach the importance of memory, heritage, and knowledge transmission. A civilization may fall, but its ideas, art, and innovations can inspire future generations. Scholars, archaeologists, and tourists today continue to learn from the Khmer Empire, highlighting that human achievement is never truly lost if it is remembered, studied, and valued. Angkor's survival in memory and scholarship reinforces the idea that legacy is as much about transmission of culture as it is about monuments. Finally, the Khmer Empire offers lessons about humility and perspective. Despite its grandeur, the empire could not withstand all pressures. Human ingenuity is extraordinary, but it exists within larger systems, environmental, social, and cosmic, that can challenge even the most advanced societies. Recognizing our achievements while remaining mindful of limitations is essential for sustainable progress. In modern terms, the Khmer Empire teaches us to balance ambition with responsibility, innovation with resilience, and leadership with service. It reminds us that greatness is built not only on monuments and power, but on systems that support people, culture that binds societies, and foresight that prepares for adversity. Angkor and its legacy remain a testament to what humans can achieve, and a cautionary tale about what happens when balance is lost. The Khmer Empire in its rise and fall is ultimately a story of humanity itself, our ability to dream, create, and inspire, and our vulnerability to forces beyond our control. Its temples, art, irrigation systems, and cultural achievements endure as a mirror reflecting our potential, our ingenuity, and the timeless lessons of civilization. By studying the Khmer, we are reminded that history is not just about the past. It is a guide, a warning, and an inspiration for the future. The Khmer Empire challenges us to ask, how will our civilizations be remembered? Will our legacy be one of vision, innovation, and cultural richness, or will it vanish like a city swallowed by the jungle? The story of Angkor urges us to build thoughtfully, lead wisely, and leave a mark that transcends time.